Hi, I'm Howard Marks, and this is How to Think About Risk. So now let's talk a little more about how risk should be handled. What determines investment success? And the best way I have to communicate this to you, in my opinion, is like the act of pulling one lottery ticket, the outcome, from a bowl full of lottery tickets, the full range of possible outcomes. As Dimson said, we're going to have one outcome. There could be many outcomes. And the outcome that occurs never amounts, in my opinion, to anything but one ticket pulled from among the many. In my opinion, superior investors have a better sense for the tickets in the bowl, for what proportion of them are winners and what proportion of them are losers, than do most other people. That's what makes them superior. And thus, they have a better grasp of whether it's worth participating in any given lottery and how heavily to bet. Now, how should each of us deal with risk? I think that risk is best assessed through subjective judgment. Since risk cannot be measured, gauging it has to be the province of subject matter experts. And I'm clearly jaundiced on the subject of quantification. I believe imprecise, qualitative, expert opinion about the probability of loss is far more useful than precise but largely irrelevant numbers concerning past and projected volatility. So, what is the essence of risk management? Peter Bernstein, again, my hero. He said, because of the existence of risk, things are going to be different from what we expect from time to time. How well are we prepared to deal when it's different? This is a great formulation. There's no challenge dealing with the events when they turn out as we expected. The question is, are we prepared for when they don't turn out as expected? According to Bernstein, risk just means things are uncertain. Good things can happen as well as bad things. But I think the definition of risk should emphasize the bad things. And thus I would say risk is the possibility that from the range of uncertain outcomes, an unfavorable one will be the one that materializes. It can consist of suffering a permanent loss of capital when bad things happen. It can also consist of missing out on gains when good things happen. These things have to be balanced. Let's say you think that if you buy something today, there's a 1/3 chance it'll be down in 6 or 12 months. What will you do about that risk? Many people will say, well, I just wouldn't buy it. But what do you do about the other 2/3, the chance that it'll be up in 6 to 12 months? How do you balance the two risks? And, in the real world, we can't make decisions in one dimension. We basically have to balance. I think that risk is something that should be dealt with constantly, continuously, not sporadically. That's why I bridle when I hear this formulation. Is this a risk-on market or a risk-off market? Remember, risk produces loss when bad things happen, and that's when we need risk control. But I believe we never know when bad things will happen, and thus when risk control will be needed. I think the right model for thinking about whether we need risk control isn't American football, it's soccer. In American football, the team with the ball has the offense on the field. They have 4 tries to go 10 yards. If they go 10 yards, they get 4 more tries to go 10 more yards, and if they can keep doing it, they eventually score. But if the team doesn't go 10 yards in 4 tries, the referee blows the whistle. The ball goes over to the other team, and they try to go 10 yards in 4 tries in the opposite direction. So we have 2 teams switching between offense and defense, changing personnel when there are stoppages. That has nothing to do with the real world. The right model, as I say, is what the rest of the world calls football. The same 11 people mostly play the whole game. Nobody tells you when to be on offense or defense, and there are very few stoppages in which to adjust tactics and personnel. That's the real world. In investing, one of the key decisions is when to be on offense, when to be on defense, how much to allocate to each of those, but nobody tells you when to do it, and nobody stops the game to give you time. I think the best model for investing and risk management is automobile insurance. We all drive, we all have cars, we all have insurance on our cars, but I don't think any of us get to the end of a year and say, I wish I hadn't had insurance because I didn't have an accident. We like having insurance for the safety it gives us, regardless of whether or not we have an accident in a particular year. I think about the intelligent bearing of risk for profit. Back in 1981, I was interviewed by one of the first cable networks, and the reporter said to me, how can you invest in high-yield bonds when you know some of them are going to go bankrupt? And for some reason, I was able to come up with the right answer on the spot. I said, the most conservative companies in America are the life insurance companies. How can they insure people's lives when they know they're all going to die? And I think it's an interesting question. But the life insurance company is, number one, taking a risk that it's aware of. They're not shocked when somebody dies. That's the way it goes. Number two, they take a risk they can analyze. And when I was a young man and got my first insurance policy, they sent a doctor to my house to see if I was healthy. Number three, they take a risk that can be diversified. So no life insurance companies insure just smokers or just people who live on the San Andreas Fault or just skydivers, just young people or just old people. They have a mix, a diversified portfolio, and they take a risk that they're well paid to bear. They figure out the probability of what they're going to have to pay you based on actuarial assumptions. They allow some windage for the uncertainty, and then they charge you a premium. We do the same. We take credit risk that we're aware of. We analyze it. We take a risk that we can diversify. We have large numbers of holdings in every portfolio which respond to different factors, and it's a risk we're well paid to bear. We get what's called a risk premium or a yield premium to take the risk of default. So the bottom line is that I believe risk is kept under control in superior portfolios. That's one of the things that superior investors do. Highly skilled investors assemble portfolios that will produce good returns if things go as expected and resist declines if they don't. This asymmetry is, in my opinion, the critical element, the cornerstone of superior investing. Assembling a portfolio that incorporates risk control along with the potential for gains is a great accomplishment, but it's often a hidden accomplishment because risk only turns into loss occasionally when the tide goes out. But the prudent investor, and hopefully his or her clients, knows that risk is being controlled even at times when it doesn't come to the surface. So I think that risk is something to be managed and controlled, but not avoided. Risk control is indispensable. Risk avoidance is not an appropriate goal in investing. Will Rogers said, you've got to go out on a limb sometimes because that's where the fruit is. I think, and my experience tells me from watching others, that risk avoidance equates to return avoidance. Intelligent bearing of risk should be able to enable us to make good returns with the risk under control.